Welcome to our 118th Counterfeit Drug Policy Briefing for the 118th Congress. With me today is Justin Macy and Dr. Tim Mackey. Let me take a moment and introduce them. Justin is the Digital Health Senior Manager at the National Association of Boards of Pharmacy. If you don't know NABP, it's the umbrella group that represents the boards of pharmacy in every state, including your state. Justin is uniquely qualified in his work as he's both a licensed pharmacist and an attorney. Justin has both researched and followed the online pharmacy crime industry for over a decade, including working with law enforcement partners to interrupt the criminals in their work. So welcome, Justin, and thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Dr. Tim Mackey has been researching the behaviors of counterfeiters, both online and off, for over a decade. Along with his teaching and research at UCSD in San Diego, Tim is the founder of S3 Research, which develops advanced technology to combat illicit online drug sales using techniques such as machine learning. Welcome, Tim.
Thanks, Shabbir.
Justin, let's start with the basics. You're a patient here in America and you think, can I get this medicine cheaper? So you go to Dr. Google and you type in Canadian pharmacy because you've heard that that's a place where there's cheap medicine. And the website you find has a Canadian maple leaf graphic on it and a name that's vaguely Canadian, or maybe even it has Canada in their name, like Canada Drugs. And there's hundreds of these things indexed by Google. Are there really hundreds of bricks and mortar pharmacies all across Canada waiting to ship mail order prescriptions to Americans?
No. At NAP, we accredit globally. So we have a collection of Canadian pharmacies that are accredited by us. About a third of the Canadian pharmacy facilities across Canada and the various provinces, they don't ship to the US. There's various reasons for that. The first and foremost is it's illegal for US patients to buy those drugs. Additionally, it's illegal for the Canadian pharmacies themselves to fill based on an American prescription written by an American doctor.
Then, as I understand it, there are criminals selling substandard medications to Americans. Because if it's not coming out of the Canadian drug supply, it must be coming out of somewhere else, and we can't trust the Canadians. And when they come to the U.S., as I understand it, they smuggle them through the small package mail. So you get a little package, and basically the volume of millions of packages that come into the U.S. every day makes it impossible for someone to from the FDA to open it up and inspect it. And in some cases, I've heard that like there's identity theft and just straight up fraud. You put your credit card information into one of these websites and you lose your money and nothing happens. So reassure me that like if that happens to me, like someone's going to eventually go to jail, right?
No, there's no guarantee that anyone will go to jail, especially if they're in another country. Extradition is very difficult. You have cross jurisdictional issues in prosecuting those cases. You need to find a district attorney who's willing to make that prosecution. And those things are just hard to do across the board. You do see prosecutions sometimes in the US when the drugs are imported in those small packages and then resold in the US, but you're not seeing scenarios where it's really effective to take action against the individual criminals who may be in Russia, for all we know. Those maple leafs do not, in fact, demonstrate that they are Canadian. In fact, if I were going to be an illegal actor, I would pretend to be Canadian. They're very nice people.
So is it possible that criminals are even located in places like Turkey or India or China and are transshipping their medicines through Canada to make them look more reliable or more Canadian?
Absolutely. And if you think about it, that is the way it would happen. And that isn't a unique Canadian law where those drugs are coming from. Transshipments happen. It's something that happens all over the world. Think about any type of regulated good. It's really being regulated in the location where it's destined for. The same thing is true of drugs. So in this instance, let's say you have a fraudulent or substandard medication being made in a bathroom somewhere that you wouldn't order food at, right? It's then being shipped through various countries to hide its pedigree or its paper trail. And then Canada is being used as a waypoint or a transshipped location to which that it comes through. So it gets that really valuable last stamp before it goes to that US consumer.
Sometimes I've heard about people ordering from online pharmacies and maybe it said it was Canadian, and then they end up getting a generic that was made for like another country's patient population, like an Indian generic or a Chinese generic or Turkish generic. Now, understanding for a second that I don't really want to place my life in the hands of the Chinese drug regulator or the Turkish one for that matter, um, you know, should I consider those safe? I mean, is it really no more complicated than that, or are there issues in other countries' drug supplies that I need to worry about?
So I think based into that assumption is a pretty big assumption that it is a generic in that country and that country regulates generics the same way that the US does. The reality is they don't always. And when we're talking about the drug supply chain in the US, every product that is produced and is in that approved supply chain that it exists there has been approved via kind of a specification, if you will, that's been overseen by the FDA. And at every step of that production, and then likewise to the wholesale distribution of that within the US, it's regulated and controlled. And so even if you had a manufacturer's plant with two different product lines being made on the exact same place, they'd be being made by different specifications with different regulatory oversight into different standards. And so, no, not only can you not assume that those generic, which they're not generic in the sense that we think of in the U.S., where they're regulated and tested against the brand name or reference listed product, they're generic in the sense that they contain this active ingredient. Hopefully.
Yeah, just wanted to add to Justin's comment that in the study that we're going to be talking about later on, we do detect counterfeit generics as well. So generics can be counterfeited, can be substandard, can be falsified, just like any other product. So it's really a question about quality rather than whether it's generic or not.
So let me understand this correctly. Because different countries have different requirements for inspection and safety and testing of medicine, you could have the same factory that's making medicine for the US drug supply to FDA tolerances that might make the same medicine for a different country's drug supply and make it, I don't want to say of a lower quality, but with less rigor than what the FDA demands. Is that really something that happens out there that I need to worry about?
Yes. So from a legal sense, they are meaningfully different. And the reason being is because of that specification. We don't actually license those facilities in the same way that we license distributors or pharmacies, where the whole enterprise is under that authority. Instead, we actually license the drug applications, essentially. Those drugs are made to that specification in the application. The labeling is done to it, the side effect profiles that are provided, any risk mitigation strategies that are put in place. All of those things are bundled and are regulated by the US. When I was in pharmacy school, I don't know if this is true. When I was in pharmacy school, there was often a joke that in India, there are more US FDA agents than there are Indian FDA agents as a result of how that regulation works itself and the amount of scope and review that has to be taken. And so, yes, it's very much possible that there are some things where the standard is higher and there's a lower standard in another place. I don't think anyone's intentionally in those instances making them to lower standards, but they're not necessarily raising, conforming to the same specifications if they don't have to.
I think there's one more question to ask in this area before we move on, which is, there are FDA inspected production lines in China, for example, but are there a bunch of production facilities in China that are also not inspected because they aren't making FDA products?
Absolutely, right? The idea is that you certainly have FDA oversight production facilities, but you certainly also have plenty of other production facilities that aren't FDA regulated, that FDA doesn't have oversight on. You could even have one company that specifically puts all of them in one location and the other, lower standards in another location. You could have instances where they don't have any FDA facilities and the products are just fraudulently produced to look like the US manufactured products.
Sometimes I talk to patients who order from some of these sketchy online pharmacies, and they tell me that they could tell by looking at it, either at the pill or the packaging, that this medicine, if it was fake, that they could tell by looking at it. Is that actually in your experience of working around the crime of online pharmacies and counterfeiters? Is that actually possible for a patient to tell?
Well, let me start by talking about my experiences as a pharmacist, right? I've routinely get calls saying, "Hey, you switched my drug on me. And it's a new generic and it looks different," right? If think about it that for a second, you'd have to call up your licensed healthcare provider to figure out if the drug that isn't counterfeit is the right one, right? So on top of that, yes, I will say of the drug products that I have held, some of them without a doubt I can look at and tell you as a pharmacist lawyer that it is a counterfeit drug or it is substandard and it likely contains no active pharmaceutical ingredient. I can also tell you that there are plenty of instances where I couldn't tell with the naked eye and that The only reason the analysis that occurred afterwards is due to forensic labs being able to actually kind of deconstruct and look for markers of counterfeit product there.
So this last week, I met a senior citizen in Nebraska who showed me the website of her Canadian online pharmacy and assured me that the medicine she was getting was the Canadian drug from the Canadian drug supply. And I looked at the website's FAQ and it said that they get medicine from Canada, but then it also listed that they also get it from Mauritius, Turkey, and other countries. Why would a Canadian online pharmacy need to get medicine from other countries? Is there not enough medicine in Canada? Or I guess you kind of spoiled this before, but it's illegal for Canadian pharmacists to dispense to Americans, right?
The short answer is I've never seen a Canadian pharmacy do that. The websites we're talking about here, the Canadian online pharmacies, they're not pharmacies. They're brokers at best, essentially taking lead generations from the search engine optimization they've done and fielding them out to whatever fulfillment they can find available. That fulfillment be of dubious quality. It could come from anywhere. We don't really know, and they're not really regulated as healthcare practitioners. When you buy from them, not only are you short circuiting and potentially getting substandard medicine, you're also potentially short circuiting the entire health infrastructure that's designed for you to take the actual medicine safely.
So maybe this particular example that I had used was not an actual Canadian running a Canadian online pharmacy, but there have been in the past Canadians running Canadian online pharmacies and selling medicine that wasn't from the Canadian drug supply or violating the pharmacist rules and dispensing to Americans through mail order. Um, in the case where they've dispensed counterfeits without active ingredients, they went to jail, right? Like this is not a problem prosecuting Canadians who engage in this illegal business because they're just a few hundred miles north of us across the border. Like that should be an easy arrest and prosecution, right?
Unfortunately, no. The prosecution, the biggest one, the largest one that I've heard of, still took, I think, 6 years or so. And at the end of the day, the person got house arrest. And in fact, while they did have their license removed, they have it back now. It's very hard to extradite, and it's very hard to challenge to prosecute these cases, even when the drug is non-sterile tap water being injected to patients.
So let's use an example because there have been a number of them. Quantum Solutions was a Canadian company shipping substandard medicines that got in trouble with the DOJ. Canada Drugs Wholesale was another one. Um, are you telling me that no one that you know of has ever gone to jail, no Canadian, for selling American substandard or counterfeit medicines? How can in the case of Canada Drugs, how can an individual be prosecuted and found guilty to have had something to do with an enterprise distributing counterfeit cancer medications to Americans and still be a practicing pharmacist after that?
I can't tell you. I don't know why. As a pharmacist, I have absolutely no idea. Now, as a lawyer, I will tell you that it's hard to prosecute across state lines, let alone across country lines. Most of the issues that are in violation here are state laws, and therefore they don't have jurisdiction over a lot of these scenarios. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I don't have a good reason why more people aren't put in jail. The reality is it doesn't happen. Usually, that the cases are much smaller than that. There's promises not to do it again, and people go about their business.
Another thing I've heard from patients who order from the black market supply chain or these fake online pharmacies that are not licensed either by the state board of pharmacy or in some cases even by a Canadian board of pharmacy. People will say to me, "Oh, well, I ordered this medication and I'm sure it's not counterfeit because I can feel it working." In your work and practice as a pharmacist, have you seen that that's actually a real thing? Can you tell if a medicine's not working? Is that a reliable way to base your health and pharmacy choices on?
Well, first, let me start by saying congratulations on getting something delivered. It's not uncommon where the idea is it's identity theft and your identity's been stolen and your credit card information's been taken. That's not an uncommon scheme here. Unfortunately, there are deliveries, and the reality is in those instances, you don't know what you got. It's Pandora's box. Now, as far as whether or not the patient can tell whether what they're taking is the active pharmaceutical ingredient, think about the times where someone takes a sugar pill and placebo works. And it doesn't mean there's active pharmaceutical ingredient. It just means it had an impact. Not to mention the nocebo effect, where someone takes something and then they actually think it's doing something bad to them and they didn't expect it. We talk about placebo a lot. Either way, the reality is that you can't tell. Otherwise, we wouldn't need labs, right? We wouldn't need doctors to prescribe them. We wouldn't need any of the infrastructure behind. Plus, there's also the unknown. There's a collection of other variables. Maybe the insulin that you purchased that has degraded because it wasn't kept in appropriate storage and supply chain. Maybe the reality is you, instead of thinking that the insulin's not working as well, you just think your diabetes is worse, right? There's multiple confounding variables that can implement this that make it really, really hard to track the exact patient harm that's occurring as a result of the poor quality medication.
So, Tim, you've been studying counterfeits and online crime pretty much for over a decade, at least as long as I've known you. Actually, maybe two decades at this point, but I'm showing both of our ages when I say that. So, I looked at your latest paper about looking at and ordering product from online pharmacies with concerns about antimicrobial resistance, and it was a little shocking. Tell me a little bit about this STAR team that you put together for this paper, because it seems like you had many disciplines at work.
Absolutely. This was a project that was very interdisciplinary. We really wanted to understand what are the risk characteristics of drugs when you buy them online, and more specifically, drugs that are commonly prescribed, the top 5 antibiotics in the United States. And so we put together a team of data scientists, public health professionals, and pharmacists, and also analytical chemistry professionals to understand what the actual risk is when you buy drugs online.
So, in your paper, you look at online pharmacies that many Americans might have purchased antibiotics from. And given the fact that we've had some shortages of medicines in this season of children, getting RSV and an outbreak of strep, it's been somewhat terrifying to see some of these shortages. But in particular, you looked at pharmacies that don't require a prescription. What is it about a pharmacy online that doesn't require a prescription that makes it so dangerous?
Yeah, Shabbir, you're absolutely right. For this study, we looked specifically at no prescription online pharmacies selling these 5 top prescribed antibiotics. And the reason why we thought those were so important to look at is because they represent the highest risk of engagement you can have online. Because one, they're not checking to see if you have a prescription, so you might not need the antibiotic that you're requesting. And two, it's very likely that they're selling substandard or fraudulent products. So when we look at these specific online websites, we were working under the hypothesis that we would get bad medicines as well. So from a consumer perspective, these are the pharmacies you really have to watch out for. Those that say you don't need a prescription, you can buy it anytime you want at any convenience. And unfortunately, when you buy that, you're probably getting something that's going to really impact your health.
I can't think of any drugs realistically that don't have a significant possibility that require a prescription of causing harm in a patient, one way or the other. When you buy something without a prescription, you're essentially saying that the patient doesn't need to see a provider for it, doesn't need to work with a pharmacist for it. And there's a lot of good reasons for those things in our system. You're essentially that the patient's saying, I don't need these things, I'm good. But that's not the way it works. And there's a reason for that.
So, your team, once you were underway with the study, bought medication from many of these online pharmacies that don't require a prescription. And Justin has talked to us about the surprise of sometimes being able to get an actual delivery. So, did some of these pharmacies just grab your money and run?
Yeah, thank you. This was a very fascinating but terrifying study at the same time that you do from a scientific perspective, thinking you're going to find one thing, but finding out it's much worse. So we did buy drugs, antibiotics with no prescription from around 100 URLs we looked at, but got delivered only 27 online pharmacies actually delivered to us. In the process, we had our prepaid cards fraudulently charged for pizza. So someone somewhere bought a lot of pizza on our behalf. From a research perspective, obviously that's kind of funny, but it's not funny when you think about people getting frauded out of their money, their hard-earned money that they're trying to use to protect their health, and essentially being victims of identity fraud. And for those products we did get, there was varying quality, as we'll talk about probably later on, and there were a lot of risk factors that went into the products when we received them. in addition to just being straight out scammed.
So Tim, let me just get this straight. Like you had controlled, preloaded debit cards that you used for this study. But if I had gone to one of these pharmacies and like used my debit card that's linked to my checking account or my credit card, they would have just run up charges, taking the money out of my account or making fraudulent charges until basically the card got turned off. Would that be a fair assumption?
Yeah, absolutely. We were very careful. We were monitoring the cards, and we found out really we didn't even know, but essentially we looked at some of the transactions, and there was all these transactions we had not approved. And the worst thing of it was for these prepaid cards, we couldn't get the money back. We actually tried to get the money back from the credit card processor, and we're not successful. So that money was lost, and some criminal used it for pizza. Sounds funny, but it wasn't really funny because, again, this happened in a number of our orders, at least a few, and there was no recourse for us in recouping that cost.
So I understand that orders were placed with 30 pharmacies, and while some of them didn't deliver anything, when they did deliver product, this is what I love about your study. You guys went in and you did chemical analysis on the quality of the products as well as examining the packaging. Tell me, what did you find?
Absolutely. So this project was really looking at multiple perspectives of risk associated with buying products online. So again, the first risk factor is buying from a no prescription online pharmacy, which is of high risk. You could get substandard and falsified medicines. The second was in the transaction, we were defrauded, but we were also asked to say a medicine wasn't a medicine, that it was a CD or some other product by the supplier. So that's another risk factor. The third is, of course, the packaging. And a lot of these medicines came in packaging where medicine shouldn't be shipped in. Boxes, blister packs that were broken, anything else that is not really meant to hold a medicine or to ship it internationally. And again, a lot of these medicines did not come from, of course, a US source. They came from overseas like India. So those are very specific risk factors. You take in all those risk factors and you also look at the analytical chemistry behind it. And though all of these products did contain some API or API in them, a lot of them had chemicals that weren't supposed to be there, like flame retardants or plasterizers or other antibiotics. In fact, in one case, they sent us Viagra, even though we didn't ask for it. And that Viagra not only had too much Viagra in it, but it also had other products in there that maybe will help with performance, but were not labeled for that particular product. So all those risk factors together, packaging, shipping, being defrauded potentially, and actually getting product that has been adulterated are real risks for patients and consumers.
So Tim, you found medicines that, and this has been a problem historically with people counterfeiting, that were substandard, right? They maybe don't have enough active ingredient or they've got some other ingredients in them. But I just want to focus on this idea of a medicine that doesn't actually have enough ingredient to perform as you expected. What does it mean to get an antibiotic that is not strong enough to kill your infection? What happens to you?
That's an excellent question, Shabbir. One of the main reasons we did this study is because antibiotics, if they don't have enough active ingredient in them, can lead to antimicrobial resistance. And this is a huge public health issue all over the world, where, of course, there's concerns about overprescribing of antibiotics, but no one really talks about how safety and quality and potentially importation of illegal product really contributes potentially to the crisis we have with antimicrobial resistance. So in a lot of these cases, it's better to have no ingredient than there is to even have half of an ingredient. And so that's the real concern here, is that people are buying these drugs and they're not working for their own health issues, but they're also contributing to this larger public health crisis.
So are you saying that if I got a weak antibiotic that was supposed to have full strength active ingredient in it, but it doesn't, it's possible that my bacteria that I'm trying to kill could evolve and I could end up in the hospital with a really treatment resistant infection?
So I'm not a clinician, and I think that depends on a case by case basis. But what we can say is that substandard product does lead to increased antimicrobial resistance. And it's possible that you as a patient could contribute towards that and also potentially suffer from that as well if you can't get access to the therapy you need. And unfortunately, again, this is an unknown area. We're not doing enough research on it. but it's another risk component for these products that are being sold online.
If a consumer wants to save money and look online, what do you suggest?
Well, first, I would say those two things aren't mutually exclusive. You can save money by using discount cards and various patient assistant programs that exist in your local brick and mortar pharmacy. And if you want to look online, it's important you make sure that you're buying from a reputable source. Safe.pharmacy is the best, easiest way for consumers to go look online and see whether or not we've reviewed a website or if it's on our not recommended list.
So, Justin, at NABP, you must get questions all the time from American patients asking about, is this or that pharmacy safe? It looks like it's safe for Canadians. Can I use it? Tell me about one time in which you got a question like that.
So yeah, I actually have a great story on this. Just recently, we had a patient contact us after making a purchase from a website and saying, "Hey, I bought this online. My understanding is it's the same drug that they would patients in Canada receive. Why shouldn't I use this?" We did a little bit of due diligence on our end, some investigation work, got on a proxy and imitated as if we were coming to the website from Canada, and realized the website says on it that they don't service patients in Canada and are not able to provide those services. So we responded back, gave a screenshot of it, and explained it to the patient. They thanked us for the information and said they won't be taking the medication.
So, a Canadian pharmacy that refuses to sell Canadian patients, I can assume that is the sign of a not safe pharmacy, right?
None of these websites are Canadian pharmacies. These websites are merely people putting maple leaves on their website, saying, calling themselves a pharmacy, but often in the frequently asked questions will even disclaim that they are not, in fact, a pharmacy, right above saying that they get drugs not from Canada.
To see all the videos in the 118th Congress Counterfeit Drug Briefing we've got, go to the URL below.